All right, it's 5:30. We'll give just a few more seconds for everyone to join here.
We need some old music.
Some elevator music.
Mm-hmm.
Here, I feel like it's been forever since I've seen you.
Yeah, it has been forever. Have you been going back into the office much lately?
I mean, Dan and Jacob are there maybe a couple times a week. I'm there maybe a couple times a month. I'm probably the one that goes in the least.
Yep, I miss being back in the office with everybody.
For a while there, I was seeing Dan every now and again, but I haven't seen him in a while either.
Well, guys, I think we can go ahead and get started. So first off, I'd like to thank everyone for joining this panel discussion tonight. We're going to be focusing on adversity and opportunity in recession. This has been put on by YAF, which is AIA Kansas City's Young Architects Forum. I'm Jake Brannon. I'm your second-year co-chair. And just a little bit about YAF before we get started. We typically offer programming that's in person and focused on skills and different things that young professionals would need to know, things like site visits, hard hat tours, and things like that. Obviously, we haven't been able to do as much of that as we really like to, but we're trying to find different opportunities to have events and programming offered virtually like this. So stay tuned throughout the year as we kind of announce more events, and we'd like to see you guys all there. Before we kind of jump into the discussion, we thought it'd be helpful to just start with some data. And I know Tony particularly is a sucker for graphs, so hopefully
I love it. I'm smiling already.
Good. Well, this is the Architecture Billings Index, and I'm sure the majority of people here are familiar with this, but in case you're not, we'll give a quick overview of this. So this keeps track of billing and all US architecture firms that choose to report, and any number over this 50 line represents growth. And outside of our industry, it actually has a lot of use. Economists use it as an indicator to kind of judge trajectories of markets about 9 to 12 months out. So while this is our field and our area of expertise, this particular metric really does say a lot about the way the economy is going, and it's used throughout the world for that. So within this metric here, we see some downturns. Of course, this is cyclical, and we'd like to hear from our panel tonight about lessons learned in each of these and how they apply today, and what a young designer might do differently with all these things in mind. So some recent examples are the 2001 dot-com crash, the Great Recession in 2008, which I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot about tonight, and what we see today, the 2020 coronavirus pandemic, which we're still in. So as you can see, this is cyclical. What we see today isn't necessarily new. We've seen this before, and we have some seasoned veterans here that have seen and experienced this. Kind of zooming in on 2020 as a whole, you can see last March, things really took a fall. This is actually the lowest the ABI has ever been. And you can see how it's affected just about every region in the continental US and just about every sector as well. So it's clear that we are in fact in a recession, and that really changes a lot about our profession and decisions that individuals and firms might make. So we're hoping to discuss that here tonight. Our panelists are Tony Rohr, Amy Slattery, Mark Niebling, Kara Bouillette, and Neil Angrisano. I'll stop sharing here. Maybe. There we go. Thank you. And we'll allow everyone a moment to introduce themselves, but first I'd like to introduce Tara Bray, the YAF co-chair, and she's gonna get us started with some questions tonight.
Hi, everybody. So we would like to start this evening by just talking a bit about 2008. We figured this might be a good segue to learn a little bit more about each of you as panelists. So if we could start, we'll just put it out there for whoever wants to jump in first to briefly tell us about at what point you were in your career in 2008 and a bit about what your experience was like.
Well, maybe I'll start because
Okay.
I'm the oddball of the group in that I wasn't in traditional practice in 2008. I was actually a public sector owner at that time. And like many, and so things that I learned then, like many similar recessions, the public sector tends to lag the private sector. In other words, any public entities that are dependent on tax dollars for their funding, bond issues, things like that, they tend to lag 12 to 18 months behind the commercial or the private sector economy. So that said, though, what we're seeing in 2020 or 21 now for my firm's public sector clients is that everyone went pretty dormant for a while, but we're seeing a lot of public clients coming out now as opposed to how it was in 2008, and saying, I got to do these projects and I'm going to go ahead with them. I'm going to go forward. We're seeing a lot of things that went very dormant for about 6 months coming back pretty hard right now. So that's a good thing. That's different than 2008. The public sector came back very slowly, at least from what I saw and what I remember in the organization that I was part of. So regardless of what the numbers and the graphs for the ABI, show, I think when things are under control, barring other factors, and there's a lot of other unknown factors right now besides just COVID, as you all know, I would expect the public sector to, and I'm an amateur at this, right? But I would expect the public sector might rebound fairly quickly compared to 2008.
I'm happy to go next. Tony Rohr with Gould Evans. In 2008, for me, I have to go back to end of 2007 because it was the end of 2007. I had been with Gould Evans, but that's when I took on my role as national managing principal of the firm. Literally like 2 months before the official recession started. And so not unlike many of you, we get very little training in terms of kind of how to run a business. And in that case, the recession was such a drop financially in terms of affecting banks that it affected all kinds of project lending and financing. I think, and Neil was touching on it, one of the big differences between then and now is that because of the real estate bust, there was tremendous pressure on banks, which dried up financing for projects and demand. And because of the real estate problems, the economics for real estate values affected the payments to counties and states, which affected the abilities for counties and states to do projects because their tax rolls were going to reduce dramatically. That's not happening right now. And so that's a reason why some counties and communities still have cash flow, still have good economics, can still keep projects going because they're not necessarily seeing that downside. So there's a pretty substantial difference, and I've tried to explain it to others as we've talked about in the firm that, 2007, 8, and 9, it seemed to last forever. That was really about the real estate bubble bursting. And it took a long time for that all to get flushed out through the system. Whereas right now, we're living through something that's kind of artificial. It's kind of like a self-induced coma that we put the economy through. It wasn't because something was, overinflated and like the .com. So therefore, I have there are good signs of things happening and activity, within 12 months of all this happening. So for me, I'm sensing that there's an easier comeback now than there was from 2008 and 9.
I'll hop in. So in 2008, I was at BNIM working on the Kauffman Center, and that project kept so many people employed through 2011 until it opened. Personally, it was devastating just watching so many friends get laid off. I mean, I had multiple friends who were married couples, like my husband and myself, who both lost their job. And so we were just so lucky that we didn't lose our jobs at that time. We had just bought a new house in 2007, had kid number 1, and then had kid number 2 in 2009. So it was totally just, I don't know, it was a stress ball. I'll just say that. And I guess the biggest thing that I learned during that time was not just kind of the volatility of what we do, but kind of the impact that it has on firms and on relationships within firms. And you just see kind of the real, everything kind of gets laid bare in some ways when you go through that kind of almost a collective trauma. So, and I don't remember the exact numbers, Kara, you might remember, but I believe BNIM was at 120 and we dropped to like, 60 or 80 over the course of those years. And what was odd about it was it also, like in 2011, we were firm of the year and everything was kind of coming back up and we almost were out of it. But like you said, Tony, it was about a 2 or 3 year climb until we came out of it. And I think the difference with this today is that, one, we are a professional group, so we are able to do our work remotely. So we haven't been hit in the industry as hard as other industries have. I think it's also kind of been an opportunity for us to kind of hone our technology and to work more broadly with our clients through technology. And if this had happened 10 years ago, it would have been a totally different kind of a reaction, I think. So I'm optimistic as a firm owner now going through this. It's been a heck of a ride, but it seems like a quicker recovery and it's a complete kind of bounce back, depending on how quickly we can get COVID under control. I will say that, in 2001, it was a totally different kind of feel because that was another really high time. I graduated in 2001 and had offers and options and really had a great time coming out. And then about 5 months later, when 9/11 happened, everything just bottomed out. And when I tried to move back here in 2002, there were no offers. So I knew early in my career that this is a volatile profession. And when I started this practice 5 years ago, I was ready because it seemed like it had been long enough that things were kind of on an upswing. It was time for the next drop. And it's pretty amazing that I've been in practice 5 years and we're now having that drop. So it's going to happen. It's just about resiliency, right? It's about, it'll be sunny tomorrow, either that or it won't. And you just kind of keep moving. Just keep moving, right, guys? So that's me.
I can go next because my story closely follows Amy's. We went to school together. We graduated together. We moved away from KU or the Kansas City area at the same time in 2001. And went our separate ways. Amy was in Dallas. I was in Chicago. But similar experiences with 2001. I actually worked for a mid-sized firm in Chicago that was hit pretty hard. And 2001 was, I would say, it was very different, but relatively speaking, it was actually probably harder for me to go through than 2008. And I'll explain some of that in a second. But in 2001, closely after 9/11, so several months, I mean, I actually lost my job. And that was, you know, here I am in this brand new city, and it was kind of the rug pulled out from under me. So I actually embraced it and moved to a different city. I followed my now husband to Austin, Texas, and that was a great experience for me. I think lesson learned, just being open to different experiences. Life doesn't typically go as planned, so just keeping you know, your opportunities open. 2008, so we actually moved back here to Kansas City in 2007, and Amy and I actually were working together at BNIM at the time. And in many ways, even though I had at that time 7 years of experience under my belt, I felt like the newbie, because I was new to Kansas City and new to the firm, and it all happened pretty quickly. So in many ways, I was concerned about being a newbie again, being, you know, maybe low man on the sheet for what may come. And I would echo Amy's sentiments that as hard as it is being let go, because I was let go, it was equally hard to see your friends being let go from a firm. Your relationships instantly change, and that was something difficult to deal with, I would say. For me, I felt I was pretty fortunate. I had fostered a relationship with a client who was, he was the head of operations for a large company in town. And we had been doing miscellaneous work with them for a while. And when things started to get pretty bad, he actually, at one of the meetings that we had, and my boss was there with us, he actually pulled my boss aside and said, hey, you know, I know things are bad, but you can't let her go. We'll find some work for her if it comes to that. So I don't know if that ever, if he ever went to him and talked to him again about that. I don't want to know, but I think lesson learned there for me was really we're a service provider, and making sure that you are providing that service to your client, that they don't want to let you go no matter what. So yeah, I guess that's what I would say about that. And then I would just echo some of the sentiments about you know, where we are today. It feels very different, and agree with Amy that I can't imagine this kind of recession 10 years ago, and what our response would have been there. Very different, very different. And I think in many ways, the recession in 2008 forced us as a profession to kind of rethink how we do things. Some of that was, I feel like we still are struggling with the ramifications of 2008. As far as, you know, lower fees, quicker pace, but it actually was, you know, in some ways it was a positive thing to force our industry to rethink how we can provide those solutions faster and cheaper for our clients. But in many ways, it also, I'm not sure we can squeeze much more out of that. It feels like at times. But maybe as an industry or as an organization, maybe that's a lesson learned that we've got from 2008 as well, how to do things different this time. So.
Yeah, for sure. Mark, can you tell us a little bit about where you were in 2008?
Sure. I was still in school. I was happy and everything was fine. And that was going well, and then started sending out resumes in, I don't know, early 2009. I graduated in 2009, and we were looking for work. I was already married, got married young, so we were looking for work in Memphis or St. Louis or Kansas City, so we were kind of, you know, spreading out a little bit, opportunities for my wife, and nothing came. My class had something like less than 2% placement upon graduation, which was pretty bad. And most of the people that found jobs, it was they went to Texas, or they went to New York, or they went to LA. They went to a market that still had an opportunity. And we came back to Kansas City, and that was really hard. I mean, it was not a good feeling to be that far into things and come out and just there was nothing. So I remember, like, at some point I realized, like, it wasn't going to happen, and that was pretty hard. We ended up moving in the basement of my in-laws' house. I was applying for, I don't know, 5 jobs a day, you know, Ace Hardware, Home Depot, whatever there was, just to try to make money, make a living. Farmers insurance. None of these things were good. And I ended up working on a golf course for about 6 months after graduation, laying sod, cutting grass, working hard. I got really fit. I got a really good tan. That was nice. But it was, you know, it was really hard to, you know, I graduated in a good position in my class, and there was just no opportunity at all. So I had interned in Kansas City at a mid-sized firm, and I just kept calling my advocate there. You know, there's one person that you have your foot in the door with, and I just kept calling. And then in, I guess it was fall of 2009, he finally called me back and said, "Hey, we need help with, you know, I know your skill set, and I know that you can do this for me, and we need your help." So I started coming in at night and working nights in the architectural office and days on the golf course. So it was like a 5 a.m. to 3 p.m. Grunt work, and then 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. Architectural office, which was important because I needed to be in there and I needed to be seen. People needed to know that I was there doing work. So that overlap it worked out. I guess it was maybe early December when they finally called me and said, "Hey, we think we have enough work for you to come on as contract for, you know, I can guarantee you full-time contract status until January," which was, you know, really weird. I mean, it was like this 2-month stint that I knew I had, and that I was doing the right thing. I don't know. It was really strange. So I signed on for that, and either immediately before that or immediately after that, you know, a handful of layoffs occurred. And so there were, you know, more. Here I am, I was a kid, you know, and then there were people being laid off that had families and, you know, whole lives. And we were just, you know, it was me and my wife, and we moved to a little apartment by KU Med that was like 450 square feet and like $450 a month. And we had one car, and she started going to school, and it just, I don't know, it was very strange. It was a very strange time. And I would say it was slow to come out of that too. Like the funk that puts an office in, it took a long time for that to wear off. The other thing that I guess we haven't talked about, you know, the 2008 crash involved the market. What's going on right now, the market doesn't seem to know the reality. I guess that's a good thing, maybe, that if this COVID thing just disappears and everyone gets vaccinated, that everything will just rebound immediately. I guess that's the hope. But 2008, it certainly took a few years to crawl out of it.
Yeah. Well, we definitely appreciate everyone's response to that. I think that will be really helpful as we move forward to kind of understand where all of our panelists were in 2008 to kind of just better inform their responses. I know we intentionally tried to assemble a diverse panel of people that were in different points of their career, so we can really offer the most advice possible. So moving forward into our next questions, these are going to focus on employment. Like a lot of you said, this recession has impacted people's jobs. I've spoken with people that have taken pay cuts or are on 4-day weeks or have been kind of loaned out to other firms. So the way that this has impacted people has been really diverse, and we'd like to ask some more pointed questions to hopefully offer some advice to them. So for those people that have lost their jobs or lost hours, anything like that, what can they do to increase their value to a firm, to try to just hold on to their jobs and make sure that they're a valued member of a team? And whoever would like to answer that can answer.
Go, Amy. I can see in your face. You've got an answer. Do it.
It's hard. I think it's. Are you talking about what to do if you're laid off, or how to not get laid off?
I would say both, because like Mark said, there's ways that you can find yourself outside the profession, and I know that some people are creative in finding ways to kind of still boost their resume toward a future job. So any advice that you might offer?
Still, I mean, and I've said this in other conversations with emerging professionals and people coming out of school, is make sure you have a diverse skill set. If you can do marketing and business development, and you can write and do InDesign, you can also help go get work. And that was actually one thing I transitioned into, doing more business development in 2010, 2011, which was tough to learn, but was also a really great skill set to continue to develop. So if you have some flexibility and some motivation to try to, make connections, that's super valuable. And honestly, probably in addition to your billable time, because you're building your own practice, your network, and there's an opportunity to bring that back to where you're working. The other side of things, if you are let go, is to not burn any bridges, and to try to stay as optimistic as possible. Give yourself some time and take a breath and rest and take care of yourself and your family, and then prepare yourself to go back out. And use your networks. Even if you don't have one, start your LinkedIn. Get your LinkedIn up to date. Reach out to AIA. There's several email strings and text strings and LinkedIn notices that I get when people know of others who are looking, and that's the best way to do it. But it's really hard, and I've over the years interviewed people who have been through it, and it's hard to say, but don't go back out until you're ready, and that you're optimistic and positive, and you can bring your best self. And then make sure you have a solid portfolio and a professional resume, and lead with those things. Don't just ask if you're hiring. Say, here I am, here's what I've done. Are you hiring? It's starting from square one. How's that, Neil?
Awesome, as I knew it would be. In fact, I might even, if you would permit me, to build on some of what you said.
Build on it.
Because it was great. I mean, you were spot on. So it is about the network. And if you want networking lessons, Amy is the master of that. And I don't say it tongue in cheek. It is so important to any profession to know people and to be known. And so if you find yourself in a unemployed situation, ideally you will have done some of this before that. And if your goal is to stay in the profession, which I hope it is, I mean, find ways to know as many people as you possibly can. If you haven't been involved in AIA, plunge in, right? Even if you have to suck it up and find the dues money to pay for yourself, go to everything, meet everyone, do some other peripheral professional type stuff, peripheral meaning like DBIA or USGBC or whatever. That is how you will make the connections. You won't go to a meeting and get a job tomorrow, but you will start to make the connections that, down the road a little bit, not just for the current issue of the economy and the job situation, but will pay dividends for your whole life. your whole professional life. The other piece to remember, and everyone has touched on this in various ways in their comments so far, but this is a cyclical profession. I mean, Tony and I have seen 4 or 5 of these now, which means we're old, right, Tony? It always comes back. It may look a little different when it does. So the question is how to try to bridge the gap, either not to fall into a unemployment situation, or how to be positioned well, like Amy was describing, when things do come back, but know it's going to come back. The other thing that's really interesting, this is just my impression, if you can hang on, even if it's a long recession, I'm not saying the current one is going to be, if you can hang on, keep your skills, keep your connections, keep your network, you will be in demand eventually, because a lot of architects disappear. A lot of architects in a certain experience range, in 2008, it was especially true. There was, and we still feel it today, there is a dearth of, 8 to 12 year people, or something like that. I have to do the math. So if you can persevere, there will come a time, and it may be 5 years down the road, where not only will you be employed, but you will be in demand because of what happened to some of your compatriots, unfortunately. We do lose, quote, generations of architects in each of these cycles. And if you can weather that storm in the long run, it may be good for you. But who knows?
I'll
Neil,
add on.
Sorry, Tony, go ahead.
Well, I was going to add on to a couple of things they said that are, maybe not just completely repetitive. When the question was about how to add value to a firm, in advance of a recession, especially when based on what Neil just said, that they happen every decade, every 8 or 9 years, that we know that there's something that's going to adjust the markets and adjust make an impact on our clients, and it's going to affect our profession. It just happens. The things that you can do to increase your value are things that you need to be doing way before the recession comes. Because it's a pretty miserable experience to sit in a room with a bunch of the leaders and try to make decisions about, how big a layoff needs to be and who's on there and who's not. And you're right. You talk a lot, and you think about the value different people bring, and a lot of it doesn't necessarily have to do with, it's often things beyond the work that they're doing at their desk every day. It's beyond being a really good teammate, and a lot of it is engagement, and how engaged and how community focused are they? And there are certain young professionals that just seem to always go the extra step to take something a little bit further, in terms of, like, they seem to understand what we're looking for beyond what the task was, and bring you something more than that. It happens routinely, like where somebody would be asked to, like, help with something, and they not only do it, they do it on time or really well, and ask if you need something else. And those things add up in terms of adding value to leaders, in terms of, like, going out of their way to try to hang on to folks like that. The notion, if you do end up in a situation, again, being able to lean back on the collected knowledge of your social capital. That's kind of what Neil was talking about. That is your social capital. It's like currency. You'll take that everywhere you go. Again, you got to build that up before you get to the point of being laid off. And I don't care how young you are, you can do it. There's inevitably people like myself going to Chamber of Commerce dinners and all kinds of fundraising things, looking for people to come along, and you should raise your hand and say, I want to go, and introduce me to 3 people while we're there. And I'm going to meet 3 people, and then you contact them on LinkedIn, email, text, whatever, and you will be surprised how quickly you build a connection system that will help you in time when these kind of situations occur. Those little investments in people, genuinely, you would be amazed at how over time they come back and can be a helpful part of your ecosystem. In 2008, one of the things that, and there wasn't really a question about this, but the firms that are smart take advantage of a recession to look at where they have problems and get rid of that problem, whether it's a person or a group of people or a market type or a client. In 2008, we had a whole, and Neil knows exactly this group. We had a group within our firm that was doing not really great work and probably caused more HR problems than they did fees. And it was a problem for the firm. It was a problem for the studio. And when the recession happened, that whole market sector just washed away. Amazon killed it and the recession killed it. And one of the best things we did was we didn't bring it back. We made zero attempt to bring that back into the firm. It was the best thing we ever did. The best thing. It was huge addition by subtraction. And some of those people who probably weren't going to be happy with us long term, especially since that was never going to be an interest of mine. Some of them went and started their own practices with some of those clients that we weren't interested in. Now, was it doing architecture? No. Was they being good service architects for some pretty marginal stuff? Yeah, they're happy doing it. That's great. Good for them. They probably were never going to be really successful with us, so they found their path. So I think firms have to be willing to say, take advantage of this time and say, what do we really care about? What is really our vision for what we're trying to do? And then double down on that, because it's hard to do that when things are going great. You have to do it when things are like a little tougher.
Can I just add on something that's a little bit different and how maybe this 2020, 21 is a little bit different than 2008 as well. I think what 2020 has taught us is that you can work remotely. So I would also encourage people to look at, similar to what Mark did, freelance work. There's websites out there that you don't have to be in the same city. You don't have to connect with a firm. We have had a freelance employee working with us for almost 3 months now, and we've never seen him face to face. So I would just encourage those individuals who maybe are looking to look outside Kansas City as a region, but look online. Just to keep those skills up as well. I don't know how that experience would be working for someone in a different city, maybe someone you don't necessarily know, but I'd give it a shot.
You get to practice and you get paid for it. It's a pretty good deal. Maintaining your skill sets, your building portfolio, you're staying current. It's worthwhile.
Absolutely.
I was going to tack on real quick to what Kara said, because she touched on something very important that I think is going to be one of the biggest changes long term that we see from the experience of practicing in 2020. And that is, you no longer have to reside where your firm's office is. And we kind of flirted with that already a little bit in my firm. We have someone in Tennessee, we have someone in South Dakota. We have a couple other folks that are not anywhere where they have a physical office. One of the things, and also in some of the things I've been reading, is now that we have figured out how to do this virtually in business in general, but even especially in the architectural profession, there's the potential now that the entire country, or maybe even the entire world, becomes your recruiting pool. And if you can get somebody that's wonderful in, Canada, or in, hell, we have an individual in South Korea that used to work for our firm here, went back there, and he's still an employee, and it works. And 2020 has brought that to the forefront of consciousness of being a practical way to practice. So I say that in the context of the discussion that we've just had, that if you are in a position for looking, don't just look in your city. There may be potential to work for a firm, God knows where, that you can work for from home or from wherever, because I think we are going to really, really see that grow because we've been forced to figure it out, and now we know how to do it. So take advantage of that.
Now, I have a question on Neil, actually, because there was a ULI conversation about this a few weeks back about that works for seasoned professionals and people who kind of know more about the practice. And I'd be interested in how things are going with your younger staff and how mentorship, because so much of what we learn is in our first 5 years of school, right? For us, I do have some younger folks, and what we've been doing is just daily touch-ins and trying to stay on top of things. And I think that's working for the most part, maintaining that QC, but how do you see that working for people right out of school?
Well, that I mean, you hit on the absolute $64,000 question. That is the biggest thing that everyone, I think, is scratching their heads about in regard to the virtual potential work environment that we have. And you're right, everyone needs connectivity and mentoring up and down and sideways, but it's especially the newer professionals. And just to be quite frank, we're scrambling around in our firm trying to figure out ways to compensate for what they're not getting. And the fact of the matter is, so much of that is informal, or even, overhearing a conversation that you're not even part of, that's part of your learning. We have a little advantage in that we're a multi, as like Tony's firm is as well, multi offices around the country, and so you have to do a little bit of that, but not to the extent when everybody's at home. That's a whole different animal. So you hit on the exact biggest pitfall of this, and I think we as a profession need to collectively work on how to overcome that, because I do think the remote working, at least to various extents, is going to be here to stay. And how to make up for the deficits like you described, Amy, of that environment is going to be key going forward.
Sounds
That
like
leads
YAF
perfectly
space.
into our next question here. Sorry, Kara, to interrupt here. I'm going to try to keep us moving so we hit all of our main themes before we hit our time here tonight. So Neil, you're talking about different ways that this pandemic and the associated recession has impacted just kind of the way that you guys work as a firm. And we were curious in this panel that we have here tonight, how has it impacted your firm culture and just the way that you guys go about your day-to-day work? And what parts of those do you think are going to stay, and which do you think or hope to leave in 2020 or 2021?
Do you want
Kara,
me to go? I feel like I've been talking too much. Somebody else go. Somebody else start that one.
Start with you.
Wait, you are starting with me?
Well, Neil, you can start. I was suggesting that maybe Kara could start.
Yeah,
So-
no, Kara, go.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Well, I think that's an interesting question for me, and I may not be the best one to answer it, just because we're such a small firm. There's just the three of us, and quite honestly, we kind of were working a little remote even before this happened, so it didn't change the way we work too drastically, quite honestly. I think one thing that it has done is just made it more acceptable to have a kid pop in your background. I'm surprised mine hasn't popped in my background here tonight yet. Or, time out, I need to go, take my dog out real quick or something. So I think just it's provided more flexibility, I think in general overall, for firms. To Amy's point, I think that there is a piece of the culture that we still have to figure out. But for 621, it hasn't been a tremendous shift. So I'll let somebody else, like Mark from a larger firm, speak to that, how it's affected them.
Sure. I mean, we're missing out on chance encounter, which is the biggest struggle. Neil was talking about, it's almost accidental the way that mentorship happens. I mean, the way that you learn when you get out of school is you sit next to someone that's older than you, and you listen to their phone calls. You figure out how they talk to the person at the city, and how they talk to the client, and how they talk to all these different people. And those are the things that that young architects are missing as part of this remote work. I know that there have been, there are attempts at intentional mentorship, and those things are good, and we have to keep doing them. But missing out on the accidental or the chance encounter is I think irreplaceable with remote working. I don't know how we're going to solve that. I know that, you know, when I'm working with someone that's younger, I touch base a lot, or I make sure that they know that they are not bothering me. Like, you need to ask me 10 questions a day. You need to talk to me about these things. And it's not like a micromanagement thing. It's just like, talk to me as if I'm sitting next to you in the office. Treat Microsoft Teams as if it's turning your head, because that's all we have at the moment.
You know, there's a lot of ongoing conversation about these topics, and I was reflecting on from the standpoint that the working remotely has been it's been easy for those that have known each other for a while, because they've built up that camaraderie and they've built up that kind of working relationship, and they can have an honest conversation on a Zoom or a Teams call because they've kind of gone through it together. The heart, you know, you have the benefit of having that investment with each other, and through a team, you know, through getting drunk together and working through projects and just a whole variety of things, right? You like each other, you respect each other, and you can have an honest conversation. I feel bad for young graduates and interns because they're not getting that kind of engagement right away. Now, thankfully, you know, when we have the ability to go back to the office, it's not going to be the same way. You know, there's probably going to be all kinds of different hybrid situations that allow us to come back and collaborate and do things when we really need to be together, but give you that flexibility, especially for working parents, to make a schedule work kind of around both work deadlines and kind of home deadlines and home situations. And I think we're all going to be way more accepting and willing. And I think hopefully working parents are going to be less concerned about how it looks on them, right? Because I think we just blasted right through that in terms of just like, hey, just get over it, we'll figure it out. Especially in terms of the ability to kind of work anywhere all the time. The thing that I worry about is the kind of, and Mark was saying something about, is kind of the serendipity that happens when you're in the studio and with people, and that it's the chance conversations around a topic or a drawing or a model or an RFP, or it's not a planned conversation. It's the serendipitous conversation that leads to a whole series of other conversations that builds to something. Those are the things I feel like we're missing out on. And you know, even though people can be highly productive working, you know, in their pajamas, wherever, in a tent in their backyard, I worry about, is the work really better? Yes, the work's getting done, but is it great? And it only gets great when we have multiple hands looking at it and kind of, you know, pushing it to be great work, because it's an iterative process that takes, you know, back and forth. So I don't know. It's not going to be the same way. Hopefully, it might be actually a much better situation for this crazy profession that occasionally takes huge demands of time from us to give us more flexibility. That's what I hope.
Well, I'll just say that, as I said earlier, we now have at least a 15 to 20 minute Teams meeting every day. And I tell my team, here's when I'm available. And then they still chat me all day long. And it's good, but it's also really tough. And being available is really important. And it starts at the leadership level to let them know, to let everybody know that we're accessible, and it's okay, because it's important. I feel like in other ways, I started in a new organization at ULI through this pandemic, and I have built more relationships face-to-face with all sorts of people, including tall men, which, if you know me, I'm 5 foot tall, so it's hard to network sometimes with 6 foot tall guys.
That's never stopped you.
I know, but I have to yell and I lose my voice. Anyway, so this is actually another kind of opportunity, because we have a face-to-face where you see that face, and if you speak up in these 80-person Zooms, you can say something kind of important in front of a lot of people, which, you know, I love. But even for those who are wallflowers, it might be a little easier. So there's opportunities with that. And I think we need to look at that. The other side of it is that we were already kind of going towards this idea of more of a networked kind of workflow where time isn't as important as the deliverable. So just in big picture terms, I think that the value of the work and the quality of the work is going to start to be more important than showing up, which is going to be good for all of us. We just, as architects, then need to figure out how to bill for that time. So I'm excited about where it's going to go. I don't think we're going to ever stop meeting every day for 15 minutes. And I try to make space and ask about everybody's day and talk about the Chiefs game. And then we end up talking right about tasks and work. So you got to make space in those conversations to have at least a little bit of dialogue.
Yep, Amy, I think that that's a great point. It's really interesting because, you know, this pandemic kind of hit us all like a brick wall, and we all had to adapt very quickly to a very different type of workflow, and still keep everything moving in the meantime. And it's easy to focus on all of the hardships that came with that, but there are definitely some opportunities that have come with this too. So we touched on them a little bit. Tony was talking about having it be an opportunity to trim some fat from your firm. It's a potential, or getting into the routine of meeting with your staff in a way that you weren't before. But what other opportunities and kind of more of the positive side of things do you guys see coming out of this this recession that we're in right now?
It's making us be more intentional with things like scheduling meetings, or these are odd things. But when you're in the office, if you forget to invite someone to a meeting, you grab them and we all go into the room and you're working on the project as a team together. But it's important to be intentional and make sure that you're inclusive and thoughtful about meetings. I think meetings are more productive, maybe, than they were previously, just because of the way that they're held now. There's a more obvious driver of the meeting and a more obvious flow to things, I think.
I feel like we realized something this last week, that we have been very task oriented and we're not as much project oriented. So while we're getting very efficient, it's, to Tony's question, I'm not sure that we're like pulling back to the larger goal. So we're starting to then plan more. Let's have a project conversation without like a goal to the half hour, where we find time to kind of think about it and explore. It's planned, I don't know, creative collisions or whatever, but we'll see if it works, because we felt like we were just checking the box a little bit. And we need to be more intentional about just making space.
Yeah, everything takes more planning because there's no chance for an accidental conversation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mark. It does take more planning. One of the things that we've seen, to get to the original question here, so we've got 8 or 9 offices across the country, but we're also divided into studios in our firm. And so our studios are our profit centers, not our offices, which is interesting. And that's a whole discussion that I won't go into. But so what used to happen was design was shared within the studios, pinups, things like that, informal critiques. And sometimes it would span offices. If some of our studios are in 3 or 4 of our offices, some are only in 1, it's complicated. But one of the things that we have started to do, which I think is a great thing, and I hope we continue it regardless of where the pandemic goes, we've started to do virtual firm-wide pinups, where a studio in our Denver office, and it's usually got alcohol involved at 4:30 or whatever, which is good. Will and the other good thing is we push the younger professionals to run these, so it's not the old guys talking, because who needs that? Put up a project that's in schematic design for whoever wants to join from around the company anywhere, regardless of office, regardless of studio, and present for 15-20 minutes the design, the problem, here's the proposed solutions, where we're at, and talk about it. And that's been wonderful. That's one of the best things that has come out of this, because we didn't used to do that before, not across offices and things like that. And so I think there are some silver linings to what we've all faced in 2020. And at least for a firm structured like ours, and the desire and the necessity to keep those going, I think is very strong.
Yeah, I would just, I mean, we've had for years different associates working remotely from different locations because a spouse's job takes them someplace and they end up, you know, in Japan or wherever, and they still work with the firm and they're highly productive and they make it work. And then they eventually move back to the States or they move back to another. So, and we currently have that same situation going on, and it just works. And so this just accelerates that capability and that ability. I mean, there's still situations where we have clients or communities, especially public sector projects, that, you know, they're very concerned about where the team lives, where you're from, you know, in terms of keeping dollars local kind of thing. So that, I think that might still be something for us as leaders to think about. But in terms of like the resources available, and we just recently had this conversation about some, you know, more senior level design talent we'd love to bring in, and we are forcing ourselves to think about not just from the standpoint of where we would have typically posted or sought advice about where that talent might be. It could be anywhere. It really could. I mean, Neil brought that up earlier. I mean, and that this new paradigm really allows that to work very easily, and I think clients would understand it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for us, it's been really interesting because, you know, during this whole remote work thing at Dake Wells, there was a pretty big concern about holding the office culture together. So there was then this big focus on, you know, how do we really boost our office culture and kind of enhance that to the best of its ability while everyone is working remotely. And that might not have been something that we would have really focused on as in depth in the way that we have if we weren't all, you know, separated. So I guess that kind of leads to a question about, you know, just from everybody in each of your different firm perspectives, how has this influenced your firm culture, and yeah, for better or for worse, or how has that, you know, influenced the way that you guys outside of work communicate with one another? And Kara, I see that I think you have to, oh, you said that your audio isn't working. That's okay, we've got that message.
I'll talk some more. So I'll just say that we were already in transition because things were just going so fast. We grew significantly in 2019, and we were already working on culture and team and how we were dealing with our massive change. And then when all of this hit, I had a lot of staff in transition anyway. I had a lot of people who were leaving, and I was bringing on new team. And so this team actually has been pretty much been built in this pandemic mode. So I feel like we have really reshifted to the goals of the firm in some ways, and it's required and been good for me to better define some things and to set goals and expectations about how we're going to work and how we're going to design and how we're going to communicate with ourselves and our clients. And so it actually allowed us some time to kind of recircle around where I originally wanted to found the firm, which has been great. At the same time, you know, I'll just be honest. So, you know, that dip, we had about a 30% dip in our revenue last year, but we had a 2/3 dip in staff because a lot of people decided to stay home with kids or moved on to other corporate jobs, or all that transition was actually in place before all this hit. A lot was happening. And what I found efficiencies as an organization. Even though we're only 4 people, we're able to get a lot of work done in a better way. And so I think there's a lot of, just in society, the conversation about how this crisis has brought out things that were already problems and enhanced those problems. and kind of challenged us to find solutions under fire in some ways. And I feel like that's kind of what little Otomo went through this last year. And I think we're going to be stronger because of it. From a culture standpoint, it's that daily communication. And then we're trying to find time to have virtual wine and things like that. But it's gonna have to change again when we come back face to face. And I'm looking forward to that very much.
Yeah, for sure. So we've asked some questions about kind of the personal side of employment, but ultimately what ends up driving a lot of these, whether people are employed or not, or what their role is completely dependent on whether or not your firm is able to acquire work. So we're curious, just how has the process of acquiring new work changed now that things are just more competitive and a little bit more cutthroat out there, now that everyone's hungry and looking for jobs?
Get really good really fast at doing virtual interviews, because most clients have gone virtual, as they should in this situation. We invested actually a fair amount of money in in equipment to allow us to do that in a way that gave a pretty professional setting, rather than a kind of like we all are right now, sort of with Zoom, and that helped, I think. But you of course have to get hungry. You have to get double down on your efforts for marketing. I will say, and I don't share this to be boastful, but to give hope. We like everyone else were very uncertain in the first part of 2020. We did a small layoff of about 8 people across the firm, which was unfortunate but necessary. But I'll say that through some focused marketing efforts and getting pretty good at pursuing work in this new environment, which includes a different type of proposal, a different type of interviewing strategy, we actually have rebounded. We have a higher backlog than we've ever had right now, which is awesome. And I have nothing to do with it, so I'm not claiming any credit. But awesome people in our firm have really worked really hard to pivot and figure out ways to tell our story in a different way that resonates with clients. And you have to be, you have to think about that and figure out what fits your firm and how you can do that engagement in a way that you aren't handicapped by the things that we're all facing right now. Going to be a different answer for each firm.
For us, oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Kara.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think for us, we're a new firm, so we don't know any different. We're out there getting work because we're getting work. But I think, if I think back to 2008, during that time, I think it's important for firms. A lot of people at that time were like, "Oh, diversify. We need to figure out new markets that we need to get into." And I think what's more important is maybe to look at your strengths and look at the firm's strengths and diversify within that area. So thinking about how you could diversify your strength more is what I would say, as opposed to spreading yourself thin amongst markets that you don't have experience in. But for us, I think we've been fortunate because, and a lot of people are at home and working from homes, and half of our practice is single family residential, and a lot of people who have kept their jobs and are still working right now are doing work to their homes because they've put off projects that they've maybe wanted to do for a long time. And so to Neil's point, we're doing quite well, even though we started in the middle of what some would say a bad time to start a firm. So we may be unique since we're probably the youngest firm here.
One of the things that we did that with the, we had a summer amount of revenue drop that Amy was talking about year over year, about 30%. And it really started taking effect in the summer. And we were pretty transparent, maybe almost too transparent for some, about exactly what our picture would look like going forward. Because I wanted to make sure it was an honest conversation with everybody about what we were dealing with and how we were going to handle it. And so, but one of the things that, even though we knew that we were going to, survive this, and we had a lot of work that had just essentially slid because of financing or whatever, it wasn't going to happen in the same time frame we had before. So we had a lot of really good, talented people available to do things. So we're keeping track. There's like a dozen different kind of proactive marketing things happening across our entire firm that have people from the entire firm working on them, that will be for potential future projects. Some of them are competitions, some of them are leads, some of them are things that some of our associates brought to us as an idea that we're letting them explore. Now they've got contacts with those clients and landowners that it potentially could become a real project. So that goes back to that engagement conversation, but it also is like sometimes, we're kind of investing in proactively trying to create some things that might happen that we think are pretty good ideas. I mean, it's not just that we're coming up with the project on our own. There's an inkling of that there's an opportunity here, or we've been led to believe about it, or there's been a tip about it, or it's a competition. But so those things you typically don't have time to do when you're really busy. And we've had a chance to pursue several of those things over the last 6 months, and some of them for sure will pay off in the future.
I think the other opportunity that you have when there's not a lot of work in the office is to overserve the clients that you have currently. It's an opportunity, to build those relationships, and it's the potential for repeat business with clients. So it's that time is valuable.
So we are really founded in the idea of long-term repeat clients. So we, to date, have done 30 projects for UMKC in the last 5 years. And a lot of those are really small projects, but that's where we have stayed focused. That's what floated us through the summer, even though first quarter and last quarter of the year was a 50% drop, the summer was about a 10% drop. Because they got CARES funded for some campus projects, and we were on call and were able to just do real nitty gritty, like access control stuff. So it wasn't exciting, but it was long-term client maintenance and sustainable work. And that's how we built the firm, and that's how I've built all relationships, is long-term client relationships, because I think it's harder to build new relationships in this kind of a riskier environment. And so having those deep relationships has been good. So back to Kara's point, in some ways we're saying no more, and not overextending ourselves, and also kind of being a little bit more direct about when our contract is up and when we can't do more. So we at the scale we're at, we can't do too much at risk, and we're working on refining those processes, which I think after you build a relationship, you can start to kind of demand a little bit more. So that idea of relationship and partnership with our consultants and our clients is really how we've sustained it and how we'll continue to sustain it.
Yeah, those responses are all very helpful. I know a lot of young people don't really have that much of a window into kind of the inner workings of leadership and how projects are acquired. So it's definitely helpful to kind of understand just the processes and how those are shifting as we kind of go into this more competitive environment, for sure. So I think we're getting toward the end of our different categories we're trying to hit on tonight. So one of our last questions, again, if you have anything you'd like to add or ask the panel, please add that in the Q&A box down below. But we're curious to ask our panel, what is one positive thing to come out of 2020? I know those are somewhat rare, so we'd be anxious to hear your answers to that.
I would like to go first. I may have to hop off of here in a moment to go be dad. I think the big thing about 2020 is an improvement in work-life balance. I mean, the ability to work an altered schedule has been a huge asset and has been a huge change to life, just in general. And whether that's for time with the family, time with the kids, or whether that's it's a 55-degree day in January and I want to go for a bike ride in the afternoon because it's beautiful out. I can run out for a couple hours. I know my schedule. I know what's managed, and I know, I know everything that's going to happen that day. I can step out, and it's not unreasonable. I'm getting the work done. I'm able to move those hours around throughout my day, and I think that expectation changing has been really nice.
Again, thank you, Mark. I definitely agree that the ability to kind of push and pull your schedule is huge, and the fact that you're able to kind of have a greater control of your time when you're working from home is definitely a plus. So thank you for that. Again, open to the rest of our panel, what's one positive thing that you've seen come out of 2020?
I mean, I think a lot of us will say that time and being more present with my kids, as painful as it is, has been really good. And my husband is a partner at El Dorado, and they haven't been back to the office since March. And I think it's actually been really good for him too. Now he's working just in crazy days because I think the day doesn't necessarily stop now. There's this other side of, well, I'm here, so I might as well keep working. Especially when you have remote offices, you can become more available. So that might be a negative still, but there is this, for me, I'd never really taken care of my home the way that I take care of it now. It was always kind of like just where we kind of raised the kids. And now I feel like as a mom and an architect, it's starting to look a little bit more like an architect's home. So that's a good thing. And I think I said it at the beginning before we started, my word for 2021 was slow. I want to try to find a way to continue to slow things down. And where we were in January and February of 2020, we were in a scramble to try to find team and to try to find staff and to meet the deadlines. And when everything stopped in March, it was a collective deep breath that I think everybody needed. As unfortunate as it was, in some ways, it was a healthy, deep breath. And I think we've all kind of found a new pace to that. And I want us to hold on to that and to value our health and the deep breaths more when things ramp back up. So I'll echo you there, Mark.
I have two things I think I would reflect on that are positives from all this. One is, and it builds on the things Amy and others were just saying, that I think there's a more civilized approach to practice. And because of what we've gone through, there's a much better realization of different working styles and different schedules and personal demands to make it all work. And so I think it's much more civilized, and I think that will pay benefits for anybody who's managing a team or deadlines. Just that level of understanding. I think we've now shown that we can do that with great flexibility. The second thing is that, when something's taken away, sometimes then you realize how much you miss it. And for me, it's reflecting on how much I know I would, if you'd have told me, I would have said I missed it, but in terms of the kind of engagement in the office and people you care about, and just, getting to visit with them face to face and share a drink and laugh and do things that are spontaneous, I just miss it horribly. And this has forced me to appreciate that in a way that I just can't, once it's taken away, and it's like, oh my Lord, where did that go? And so I can't wait to be able to do that safely again with all those people that you spent so much incredible energy with.
I'll pile on that, Tony, because I agree with several things you said. So our office, just FYI, we have voluntary return. So we're running about 5 or 10% office occupancy right now. I am one of the ones that wanted to come back, so I've been here pretty much every day, but there's just a handful of us. And it was my birthday the other day, and the 4 or 5 people that were here, we were all going to go out and get tacos and margaritas at lunch. And it was awesome. It was amazing. It felt like $1 million to do that again. So I think that the trick then is to find out how to bring the social aspect and the mentoring and camaraderie and collegiality back to practice when everyone's not going to be there together. And I think we're still figuring that out. I really do. And so that was an interesting bit of a reflection. The other thing that I was going to mention is I think this is an opportunity, and you ladies can shoot me down or tell me I'm wrong or tell me I'm right. But for younger professionals or any professionals that were raising families or had obligations of various types that we all go through in our various stages of life, I hate almost to even say these words, but it's still not an equal thing between men and women for on average, right? Which is unfortunate, but that's still the world we live in. And I think the potential now for the flexibility that was spoke of by several of you for when you work, where you work, how you work, could go a long way to equalizing that so that there is no penalty paid for what stage you are in your personal life or what gender you are, and those pieces that always have factored into a bit of an unfair seen or unseen aspect of engaging with your profession. And if that happens, that is wonderful. That is fantastic, and we need that. So that would be one of the things that I would hope 2020 has taught us how to get by and help level that playing field that is still not level yet across our profession.
Can you guys hear me? This is Kara.
Yes, go Kara.
Yes.
Okay, great. I agree with you, Neil, and I do hope that, I know as a mom of 2 kiddos, and I know Amy's been through this as well with her too, that it's something that the profession has needed and wanted for many years. But I also hope it's an opportunity for just people to give time to their passion as well, and to avoid burnout. I think there's a lot of burnout in our profession because of the culture that firms have had in the past of that working overtime, and that's a good thing. And I think we've all come to realize through research and experience that that's not a good thing, and everyone needs time out of the office. We've probably had too much time out of the office now, but when we return, I think it is important that it's not just about working families. It's for people to pursue their cup, I'll say. So I hope it's just an opportunity for take a deep breath and go slow and not burn out.
Well said, Kara.
I'll follow one thing that you said there, Neil, because it's kind of two sides of a tough conversation, because women have stayed home more than men. Women have been hit harder by this than men, and already distressed populations have been harder than us professionals, educated professionals. And I think what we have to come out of this with is kind of a call to action that this screen is all white, and we have to start to really address larger systemic problems. And while, yes, I think it somewhat levels the playing field, I think in some ways you finally start to feel our pain a little bit more. That's how I like to think about it, is that
Well, that's important too.
right?
But,
Like,
yeah.
I think there's more empathy now for how a working mom juggles all of it in our heads. I mean, literally. And I think that's the first step towards the problems that the profession and society has to work through. So while I'm optimistic, I'm also really concerned about how we make sure we make this opening back up as accessible as possible for all. And it's something we now have time and we can build our passion toward. So let's do it.
Well, the issue of the absolutely abysmal diversity in our profession is worthy of multiple conversations like this with firm leaders. And it's got many layers to it. I'm personally very involved in it with our firm and the Large Firm Roundtable. It's close to my heart right now. And it's, you know, it's systemic. It's going to take a long time. It takes targeted action. You know, we now have a NOMA chapter in Kansas City. You know, it would be a very, very healthy conversation to have at some point in terms of what does that actually mean for the near future and the long future as we come out of the recession.
Yeah, those were all great responses. We appreciate it. And I think you've all done a great job of kind of highlighting the theme that we wanted to really drive home today. And that's that within this adversity that we're all seeing, there's also some opportunity to adapt and evolve and make sure that we're a better prepared and more equitable, all those things, profession when we come out on the other side. So we appreciate everyone's perspectives. We're going to wrap up just a few minutes early here. We appreciate everyone's time and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Jake.
These are
Thanks,
fantastic conversations, and I salute you for having them. Keep doing more.
Absolutely. Cheers.
Thank you all. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Guys.